Alright, this right here is the pre-calculus, chapter 1, review for the test. So these questions are going to be just like what's going to be on the test. The first question over here says, solve the equations and then graph and label intersection points. So, when you guys look up here, key word here is we got the word and. Okay, and means that we're going to do two parts. We're going to solve the equations, and the way you could do that is by the elimination method. So we'll do the elimination method first. Lucky for us on this one, they already are ready to eliminate. If they don't have a variable that's the same number, then you're going to have to multiply by a number to all of the terms. On this one, we're lucky the x's will eliminate. So I have 0 x's, I will end up with 6 y's, and I'm going to end up with 48. And then you just use algebra to solve. And that gives me 6 times 8 is 48. So y is 8. Okay, I'm not done though. Once you know y, I need to also find x. Okay, so to find x, I'm going to take this y, and I'm going to plug it back in. If I plug that back in, I'll write it down here. I'd have a negative 2x plus 8 equals negative 2. Okay, I then would solve that by minusing the 8. I'd have a negative 2x equals a negative 10. And then I would divide by a negative 2, giving me x equaling 5. Okay, so there's my solution algebraically. But now if I come back up here, question not only asks for us to solve the equation, it then says graph and label the intersection point. Okay, how do you graph a line? In order to graph a line, we must always get the letter y by itself. So on this equation right here, I'll move this over here. I would add 2x to both sides. And I'm left with y equaling 2x minus 2. Okay, there's one equation I need to graph. And the second equation, I'll bring that over here. I'm again going to get y by itself, so I'll minus 2x to each side. I would be left with 5y equals negative 2x and a positive 50. Okay, I then would divide everything by 5. So I get y equals negative 2/5 x plus 10. And there is my second equation that I'm going to need to graph. Okay, and on the test I will actually have graph sheet of paper for you sitting there. But here I don't, so let's graph this. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the green line, the y-intercept is 10. So the green line right here, the y-intercept is 10. I am then going to do the slope, and my slope is right here, which would be down 2 and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then down 2 more and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there's my green line. And then if I slide up here, I also need to graph my blue line. So the blue line here, the equation for that guy, I'm going to drag him down here, is going to be y equals 2x minus 2. So my y-intercept for the blue line would be down here at negative 2, and my slope, I put it over 1, so I'd go up 2, over 1, up 2, over 1, up 2, over 1, up 2, over 1, up 2, over 1. Ooh, that's nice, because it matched up for me. And the question is, where do these two lines intersect? And if you look, does it look like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over and up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 5, 8, and You guys notice that this point right here would match up to that intersection. So I have now solved that by graphing it and by solving it using algebra. Questions? Alright, next one. Find the equation of a line that goes through those 2 points. Whenever I'm looking for the equation of a line, I know a line always has slope. When in doubt, slope it out. So, I'm going to find the slope first. I'm going to subtract my y's, so 5 minus 2. And if I start with 5, I have to start with a 3. I then would end up with a 3 on top, and this turns into a plus here. So that'd be a 4 on bottom, and I now have a slope. Okay, so this is a slope. And this right here would be a point. So if I have a point and a slope, the formula I'm going to use is the point-slope formula. Okay, which gives me y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, so plugging those in, I would get y minus, my y1 here would be, in the point I selected, would be a 5. And then I would have 3/4, and I'm going to get an x. And then minus my x1 here would be a 3. Okay, the next thing I'm going to need to do here is distribute to get rid of that parenthesis. Okay, so if I distribute here and here, I would get 3/4 x minus 9/4. Okay, last step is move that y over, that 5 over. So I would add 5, and I'd add 5. Okay, so I get 3/4 x, and then I would go in my calculator, 5 minus 9/4. It's 2.75, and if you want to do that as a decimal or a mixed fraction, it would be a positive 2 3/4. Or if you went math fraction, another number you could have for this would be 11/4. So 2.75 is the number you could have there, 11/4, or the number that I have right there, which is 2 3/4. All would work. Questions on that? Alright, next question. Find the slope and the y-intercept of the equation of a line. Okay, again, it's the equation of a line. To find the equation and those important things, how do you graph stuff? You get what letter by itself? And what else should we do here? We get y by itself, correct? So minus 5x minus 5x. 7y equals a negative 5x plus 3. Last step is divide by 7. So I would end up with y equals negative 5 over 7x plus 3 over 7. And now the question was find the slope. Well, there it is. Slope, label it, and then it says find the y-intercept. Well, there it is, the y-intercept. Boom. Alright, next one. What is the equation for the discriminant? Well, the exact equation for the discriminant would actually be b squared minus 4ac. Well, that looks familiar. Where is that actually coming from? Well, does this guy look familiar to anybody here? Anybody? Raise your hand. Alright, yep. Yep, that looks like, yep, that song, yep. X equals negative b. Alright, so there it is. Yes, that is the quadratic formula there. So the quadratic formula is the whole thing, but the discriminant is just the stuff under the square root. Okay? On the test, I'll ask you a question like find the discriminant of an equation. Use that equation and be able to figure it out. Alright, here's the next question. So, let A equal those 2 points and B equals those 2 coordinates, sorry. And it says find the distance of AB and find the midpoint. Well, the test might also say find the length. So length and distance, same thing. Okay, so we'll do A first here. Distance formula was that really long equation. So x1, and it doesn't matter which x is first. And then I'm going to do the y1 minus y2. Alright, so what are my x coordinates here? My x coordinates would be a 2 and a 0. Now if I started with 2, what must I start with on the next one? Correct, -5. So -5 minus 7. Okay, so then in doing that I would have a 2 squared plus -12 squared. So then that actually would give me a 4 plus a 144, which gives me a 148. Then I gotta ask myself, does that break into any perfect squares? Well, 48 looks like it might be divisible by 4, so I would go 148 divided by 4 in my calculator. And it would be 4 times 37 gives me 148, so therefore the square root of 4 turns into 2. So then I would get 2 square root 37. That is the distance. The other thing I'm looking for up here is my midpoint. Well, midpoint has a sweet formula. Midpoint means the middle or the average of 2 points. So I'm going to add the 2 points up and divide by 2, which means I'm going to add my x's up here. So x1 plus x2, and then y1 plus y2. Okay, so then if I plug those in, my x's would be 2 plus 0 divided by 2, which gives me 2 over 2, which equals 1. And on the other side here, I'm going to get a -5 plus 7 divided by 2, which gives me, again, 2 over 2, which is 1. So here would be my midpoint. Notice this looks like a what? Point. So that's why it's called a midpoint, because it looks like a point. Alright, next one. Write an equation of a line that is perpendicular to the line that's given there and is on the point that is given there. So when I look up here, I gotta look at some key things here. I see they want me to write what? An equation of a line. Oh, I know how to do that. So do you. Okay, and then the other key word that came up here was perpendicular. And what did they give me to go perpendicular of? That guy. Well, perpendicular, what does that mean? Yes, negative reciprocal. So, of the slope. So I need to find the slope. When in doubt, slope it out. Anytime we're looking for an equation of a line, when in doubt, slope it out. So, well, I gotta get what letter by itself then, everybody? Yeah, the y. And what you do to one side, you do to the other. Alright. Next up here, I would look at this beast and probably get rid of that y there with that 3. So I divide by a -3 on everything. Nice. Cancel it out. And a nice thing here would be 5/3, because a negative and a negative make a positive. And then I got a -2/3, which actually that doesn't mean anything to me. Because, again, I'm going off of the word perpendicular. Okay, well, I need to find the slope. Found it. Okay, so m equaled 5/3. Now here's the deal. That was my slope of my old line. I want something that is perpendicular. So what does my new slope have to be up here? The negative reciprocal, correct. So then I would do a -3/5. I'd flip that beast over and make it negative. So now I have a slope and a point. A slope and a point. Any ideas what formula I might use? Correct, this point slope formula. So that would be y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Alright, so let's plug them in. So we got a y here, minus my y value, which is -6, equals my new slope, which is there. What if it was parallel on the test? If it says parallel, parallel lines have the same slope, so I would just use the same number. On this question, it says perpendicular. Alright, so it'd be x minus, what's my x value here? 3. Nice. And therefore I would then distribute, because I got to get rid of the parentheses. So I'd get -3/5 x minus, actually negative and a negative make a positive. 3 times 3 on top would be 9/5. And on this side it would turn into a y plus 6. And again, I got to get y by itself. So using algebra I would minus 6. And in my calculator I would then take a -6 plus a 9 divided by 5, which gives me -4.2. So y equals -3/5 x minus 4.2. If you wanted to go math fraction, it would be negative. So this could also be -21/5 if you wanted to do, oops. So it could be -21/5 as another, or 4 and 1, -4 1/5. So these are all the same numbers as 4.2. Okay, but you don't need to write that if you don't want, and that's my answer. Alright, next question. Graph a horizontal line through that point, and then tell what kind of slope it has. Well, if I were to graph this, so here's my xy axis, the point is over 3 and up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Alright, there's the point. Alright, horizontal, well, horizontal would mean probably like a horizon, so this direction. There it is. If I wanted to label that line, it would be a y equals, because it goes through the y-axis, so y equals 7. Alright, if I put a 0 on here, does that 0 stay or fall off? It stays, and since it stays, since the 0 stays, that means it is 0 slope. Now the test, maybe I'll give you a vertical line. And if I gave you a vertical line, what type of slope would that be? Correct, no slope. And no slope, if you think about it, this would just be a side problem over here. If I had a vertical line and I put a 0 on that, what's happening to that 0? It's falling off. Since it falls off, it would be no slope. So this is for a vertical line. And if you did this equation, if I did a vertical line right here, what would that equation be? X equals 3 if you did that. Okay, the question did not ask for that, but if it did, that would be how you would do it. Alright, we got Maria here. Maria's new car costs $280 per month for her car payments and insurance. She estimates that the gas and maintenance cost 15 cents per mile. Express her total monthly cost as a function of miles driven during the month. So if I'm going to do a cost, I know they're all costs here, so I don't have to put negatives on this. I would say the cost of x, so the function c of x equals, well, what do I know? Correct, yes, I know that $280 is what I have to pay every month. So that's my month automatically. I pay $280 to start the month. Okay, coming out of my checkbook. Alright, well, what else is going to increase my costs? Well, we got 15 cents per mile. Do I know how many miles I'm going to do or drive? I do not. So since I don't know that, that would be my variable. So then it could be like 0.15x. Oh, sweet. There's an equation. It's actually a linear function with a y-intercept and a slope sitting up there, which goes to my next question for part B. What is the slope of the graph of the cost function? What is the slope of the graph of the cost function? So my slope, well, that's right here. So my slope, m, or my slope, would equal 0.15. That would be the answer for B. Alright, next up, we got some i's. Okay, remember there's a pattern here. I'll highlight it so it makes it a little easier. We got an I here, we got an I squared, we got an I to the third, an I to the fourth. I is the same as I. I squared is a negative 1, I to the fourth is a positive 1, and I to the third is an I. Whenever I have an even power, my even powers mean I will not have an I left over. So I don't have an I left over with my evens. Odd powers though, with my I to the first and I to the third, I will have an I. One's negative, one's positive. Okay, you do need to have that pattern memorized. So, knowing that that pattern goes in groups of 4, every 4 it'll repeat. Can I get 31 close to groups of 4? And I can. It'd be I to the 28th times I to the third would get me to 31. I to the 28th is the same as I to the 4th to the 7th. And what's I to the 4th turn into? A 1. So that'd be 1 to the 7th, which is 1, times I to the third. And what is I to the third equal? Correct. Negative I. Alright, next one, negative 3. Now negative exponents, we can't do the negatives, but we can do positives. Again, we know they go in groups of 4. So I could just keep adding 4 to that power until it turns positive. So if I added 4 more to this power, now that would put me to what? I to the first. Yep, and what is I to the first? Correct, just I. Alrighty, let's get some more. Ooh, yeah, this is a sweet problem. So I have this problem here. Rules with fractions, what are they? Correct, you can't have an I in the denominator. What else can't we have in the denominator? Nice, yep, a square root. So I can't have either one of those. So, how do I get rid of that? Starts with a C, ends with conjugate. Correct, conjugate, nice. Okay, so I'm going to do the conjugate here. What was the conjugate? What did that mean? I'd have a 1 and a plus, and then an I square root 2 and another. And if you do something on the bottom, you have to do the exact same thing on top. Okay, and now I'm going to put actually everything in parentheses, because what do I need to do now? Foil, yes, foil. So, let's foil the top first. So if I foil the top, 3 times 1 gives me 3. 3 times a negative, or times I square root 2 gives me 3I square root 2. Okay, if we go to the inside of the foil, it'd be plus a 4I square root 2. And then the last term would be 4I times I gives me 4I squared. Square root 2 times square root 2 gives me a square root 4. Alright, well what things can I change here? Well, I know I squared turns into a negative 1. I know square root of 4 turns into 2. And I still have a 4 here that's positive. So what can I do with the 2, the 4, and the negative 1? Correct, I can multiply them. And if I multiply them, that would give me a negative 8. So I have a negative 8 here, but what do I have up here? Are those like terms? Yes, they are. So I'd have a negative 5. Okay, and then I got this guy and this guy. Those are like terms, so let's add them. 3 plus 4 is 7, so 7I square root 2. That's the top of my fraction. Now let's look at the bottom of my fraction. So if I have the bottom here, cool thing about conjugates is you don't have to actually do the oi, the outside and the inside. We just got to do the first and the last. Okay, so if I do the first here, 1 times 1, what does that give me? 1. The outside will give me, and the inside will cancel when you do that. And then I got to do my last term. So negative I times a positive I gives me negative I squared. Square root 2 times square root 2, square root 4. And then if I simplify here, I know that this turns into a negative 1. I know this turns into a 2. So I have a 2 times a negative 1 times a negative, which gives me a positive 2. So 1 plus, this whole thing turns into 2 here. All of this will turn into 2. Okay? And then that would give me a 3 on the bottom. So my final step is to split it into 2 parts. So then it'd be negative 5 over 3. And then plus 7I square root 2 over 3. It's called a complex number, and that's my final answer. Questions on that? Alright, next problem here. So looking at this problem, What do we got going on here? Well, first step is I never want negatives on the square roots because those turn into what? I is correct, so let's bring those out. So now I have I square root 3 plus, well, if I bring out an I, that would mean I put it here, but what's already out there? There's already another I there, so what's I times I give me? I squared. Okay, and then I got a square root 27. Okay, square root 27, that actually breaks down a little further. What are the perfect squares inside of there? 9 times what? 3. And what's the square root of 9 turn into? 3. So now I got 3 square root 3. What's an I squared turn into here? Negative 1, which multiplies into that 3, which is actually now just a negative 3. And what still needs to be brought down here? I square root 3. Now can you combine those? I cannot, so I'm done at this step. If there were an I right here, which there is not, but if there was, then you could combine those. But since there is not, okay, you'd be done at that step. Alright, next one, solve for x. So, on the test, there'll be a couple solving ones. You can solve that 3 ways. What are they? Factoring, yep, quadratic formula, and completing the square. I'm going to tell you this one doesn't factor, so I'm going to do completing the square just to practice it. Alright, so completing the square, and it's nice because the x is by itself, the x squared in front, and the middle term is even. And it's already kind of set up for us for completing the square. Alright, so if I'm completing the square here, what's my first step? Take my middle number, which is this 2 here. I divide by 2. And then I get a 1, and then what do I do with that 1? Yep, we square it, which gives me a 1. And what do I do with that 1? I'm going to add that to both sides. Alright, next step, quick factoring here. What times what gives me this x squared here? Correct, x times x. What times what gives me the last term? Yep, a 1, and since this was a positive 1 here, that same answer is going to be what goes right here as a plus 1. Okay, and then I just simplify the right side into negative 1. And then what's my final step here? I'm going to square root both sides. And I get x plus 1 equals, square root of negative. Well, let's remember there's 2 answers, plus or minus, and then square root of negative 1 is actually an I. So what'll be my final step here? Minus the 1 over, and then x equals a negative 1 plus or minus I. Now, you are going to have to do one graphing tomorrow with a parabola. If that parabola gives you, when you solve it for your x-intercepts, and you get imaginary, is there any zeros of the function then? There's not. Imaginary x-intercepts mean they are not going to cross the x-intercepts, or the x-axis. It means it's a floating smiley face, or a floating frowning face. It will not cross the x-axis if you get an I. But you can find the axis of symmetry, the AOS, and you can still find the vertex. And the last type of problem here. So we're going to do the 4 things so we can practice our graphing skills. Okay. This problem will probably just say solve on the test, but we'll practice here because I didn't get a problem like that in yet. Okay, so what are the 4 things I need? The y-intercept, the x-intercept, the AOS, which stands for axis of symmetry, and the vertex. Alright, y-intercept, that's the easy one. And remember, whenever you solve for a quadratic formula, when you factor, our goal all the time is to get all the numbers on the same side of the equation. Okay, so if I'm looking at this and I'm looking for the y-intercept, that's the easiest one. What is the y-intercept up here? A 3, correct. Okay, how do we find the x-intercept? There's 3 ways. Factor, complete the square, or quadratic. Alright, so if that's the deal on this one, I'm going to tell you it won't factor, but we could try it, but it doesn't. So then I'm actually going to jump directly to complete the square, or quadratic formula, sorry. Okay, so if I do the quadratic formula, it's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I'm going to get my calculator out here, and I know 12 squared is 144, so I'd have a negative 12 plus or minus, now you can plug that whole thing in your calculator at the same time if you want, 144 minus 12, so 144